I decided to start a Mittleider garden, and it is fall of 2013. It's my fall garden, and my goal is to do more experiments. As I've stated before in previous videos, this summer has been all about experimenting for me. It hasn't necessarily been all about production, but rather experimenting and learning for growing in my conditions. And I highly recommend that you consider doing that yourself if you are starting. Start small and work your way up. I've been watching a channel by the name of LDS Prepper, and I highly recommend that you go and check out his channel. He is an advocate for the Mittleider gardening method, and this couple of weeks ago I bought the Mittleider gardening course and the course book and the fertilizer or micronutrient mix, and have implemented that method in this garden bed. Now, if you remember what this garden bed looked like before, I'll put a picture up and a link to a previous video. You'll know that I had some struggles with it. First of all, I believe that I had too many mixed in wood chips, and the soil began to be compacted, and or nitrogen had been robbed from the soil. So what I did is I mixed in several pounds of sand and peat moss into this soil bed and leveled it out, and I am now following the Mittleider gardening method with the weekly feed. More videos on that coming up at a later date. What you'll notice is seedlings that I have started from seed from my heirloom tomatoes. Over on the far end is the Mexican midgets. I planted 2 of those. My goal was to allow them to grow up and help to create shade for some of the greens that I have growing on the left side. The Mexican midgets I started from a sucker. On in I have beefsteak, German Johnsons, and black Krim, and I'm already noticing an exponential amount of growth for the lack of increased temperature that we have been having. The growth has been phenomenal, and I'm very excited about that. I also followed the Mittleider gardening course method on starting seeds, and I bought some heirloom tomatoes from a roadside stand up the way a few weeks ago, and I started some German pinks here, 4 clusters of them with 2 or 3 seeds each. I'll thin those out in a little while, but what I want you to notice is that I covered them with burlap sack until they sprouted. They sprouted within the first germinated within the first couple of days, and I pulled the burlap sack off the top, and here's what we have. Very interesting progress. I also had a couple of broccoli seeds left over, and there's one of them growing. Again, this is a test patch for the Mittleider gardening method. I have a bean that is not doing so well. I started the broccoli and the bean along with several other seeds earlier in the midsummer, and this is what I have so far. It's very depressing. I started it in the wrong soil. I also have a single kohlrabi plant, a single kale plant. Again, these are hybrids that I bought from a local farm store, but the purpose for doing this is simply that I believe there is a better way to grow, and my goal again is to run a test on this this garden patch. I also have some bibbed lettuce, a collard green, and gosh, I'm not even sure what that one is down there, but another cool weather plant. Now you'll also notice that I left one of my German Johnson tomato plants that is a mature plant, and it was almost completely dead, but it had a couple of tomatoes left on them, and after using the Mittleider fertilizer mix, it's now been a week and a half since I started replanted this bed, and since I put the mixture in. You'll notice that this plant, this tomato plant, has taken off, and it is now starting to bloom again. So I'm going to leave that in as long as what I can leave it in hopes that I will get a better result or a good result comparing it against some of the other German Johnsons that I just have started for my fall garden from seed. So on the left side, I spent less money on soil amendments. You can tell it's much more filled with clay. However, I did put in several cubic yards of peat moss, and I believe that I will have okay results out of this garden bed. Now, the reason that I did not spend a fair amount of money on adding sand and additional soil amendments is I am also using the Mittleider feeding mix, the weekly feed. On Sunday evenings I'm adding the weekly feed to this bed as well. I had a couple of volunteer cucumbers come up and a summer squash come up because I left a couple of cucumbers and a couple of summer squash to rot in the garden bed simply because I wanted to see if the hybrids would reseed themselves, and they have. I still have some carrots left over, and I'm pulling them out slowly, a few at a time, just for eating purposes. And I have 3 stalks, mature stalks of cabbage that we cut, and I left them in the ground because I'm wanting to see if I can regrow heads of cabbage from existing stalks. There's also a green one right over there. Ultimately, my goal is, again, trial and error. Hopefully more trial than error. One more thing I want to point out. Over here in the corner bed, I still have a heirloom Mexican midget growing, and we have a German Johnson. I'm really falling in love with these German Johnsons, but with that being said, the German Johnson has only produced 1 tomato. I started it from a sucker. Several videos ago I started it from a sucker, and it's never done very well. I'm going to try to nurse them back to health, but their soil is less than par condition, and I do believe that I need to add about 3 or 4 inches of good topsoil, but also mix it in very well and add quite a bit of sand. This is the same soil that I started out with in this garden bed here. So I'm hoping that this garden bed proves to be sufficient, and if it does, we'll expand the Mittleider method. Now, one other reason why I did not spend a lot of money on soil amendments with the large garden bed here, it's about the only level area in our whole yard, and I am going to use this area and build a greenhouse here throughout the winter or throughout the later part of this fall, and hopefully start an aquaponics system. So we'll also be including that in some of the videos as well. So I hope this has been helpful and informative, and I will continue to keep you updated as to the progress.
If you found this video to be helpful, informative, or otherwise entertaining, don't forget to subscribe, and as always, remember to smile for a stranger today. You'll both be glad you did.